Hello, my name is Ralf Friedrichs. I'm an addiction recovery coach and the host of the Take Your Life Back Today show. As an addiction recovery coach, I want to share something with you. Let me be crystal clear to leave an everlasting impact upon you. Just imagine being buried alive. You're in the coffin, but you know you're not dead. You don't know how to get out of that coffin, so you tried lifting the lid, but the lid won't open. You then try banging on the lid to unsettle the dirt that's upon you. Hold on one second. Pugsley! This is what it's like to find yourself at the lowest point of addiction. You know you need help. You know you can't do it on your own, but you don't know how to get help. In reality, there are people standing by your grave, but you just don't know that. You just think you're going to die. Usually, though, people don't think about death when they're habitually abusing drugs and alcohol. In order to feed an addiction, you have to be great at repressing the fear of death. I often ask you, my audience, did it ever cross your mind while you were abusing drugs and alcohol that maybe, just maybe, you might overdose and take something away that was given to you by the Lord Jesus, called life? And if that's not selfish enough, you're taking your life away from the people that count and love you most, people like your children, your grandchildren. With this, let me leave one last thought. Don't be like the person that I'm reading about on these index cards that waited and waited until it was too late. Instead, pick up the phone and say, hit 844-405-HELP and say, Ralph, I need help. And I promise you, I will help you take your life back before your life is completely gone. You can also get a hold of Larry Geis at 516-458-2741 or www.odysseyconsultant.org. Larry Geis and I always tell folks like you, doesn't matter where you've been, it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is that you're here looking for help. Give Larry a call. He's an addiction and life coach. 516-458-2741. I want to dive right into this today because it's important. The epidemic on Long Island for heroin is amazing. When 18-year-old Natalie Sieper of Massapequa fatally, and I mean fatally, overdosed on heroin at her seafood house party in 2008, the Nassau and Suffolk counties were so outraged that they pretty much passed laws in her name, launching heroin arrest tracking websites to raise awareness to opiate abuse epidemic here on Long Island. The talented singer, cheerleader, and honor student who was about to graduate from Plain Edge High School had become the poster child for the epidemic, galvanizing suburban Long Island as residents came to grips with the fact that the scourge of heroin was not just an urban problem, but it was a problem even throughout New York State. Her untimely death and the laws it sparked served as a clarion call that we needed changes, and we needed changes quick. Or it seemed at the time, Nassau officials hadn't updated their version of the website in 3 years, so it's about time they started doing that. At anti-drug lectures, Nassau police and prosecutors tout Natalie's law, which also requires Nassau, but not Suffolk police, to notify school superintendents of heroin busts in their districts, alerting educators to when added needed to teach students about dangers of drug abuse is necessary. But some of those presenters, even some legislators who voted for it, were unaware that Nassau disregarded half of the landmark of local anti-heroin law it enacted following a press investigation series in 2008 that exposed depths, and I say depths, of Long Island heroin epidemic. One could barely remember the law's namesake. I can't believe it's 6 years ago that, oh my gosh, I know the name, Nassau District Attorney Catherine Rice said last month as she struggled for 5 seconds to remember Sieper's name during an anti-heroin presentation, a program named what Sieper's parents heard from other unwritten parents at their daughter's funeral. Not my child, at a Syosset Middle School. Hofstra University transfer. To be fair, Rice's office is not responsible for updating the so-called Drug Mapping Index website. Online maps that show where heroin arrests have happened, the police and information technology departments are responsible for that, but Nassau Police Inspector Ken Lack, the department's chief spokesman, dismissed the press request for comment on the issue, stating that the agency's entire website was under construction, although it was only since January. Brian Nevin, a spokesman for County Executive Ed Magano, later blamed the technical issues and said that a heroin map site will be up very shortly. This map, dated April 2011 is the last known version of Nassau's heroin arrests index mandated by Natalie's Law before the site was finally relaunched last week following a press conference. Now, mind you, this is 2016. This, I believe, was written in 2014. This map, dated April 12, 2011, is the latest version of Nassau's heroin arrest index mandated by Natalie's Law before the site was relaunched last week following a press inquiry regarding the tool's 3-year absence. The website finally relaunched last week, 2 months after the press had asked when it was down, but without explanation for a 3-year gap in compliance with the law. It only lists heroin arrests for the first 3 months of that year, with Massapequa still leading the county. Natalie's father, Victor Siapa, is livid about these findings. So basically, they took my daughter's name and her memory and passed a great law, but nobody's doing a, I can't use the word, effing thing about it, he says, adding that he suspects that the schools aren't taking action such as alerting parents when the police notify administrators of the nearby heroin arrest as they are supposed to. I am more frustrated than ever in my life. Robert Friedman, Executive Director of New York State Committee on Open Government, is co-founded by Nassau's failure to use its own particular laws. It would seem that the idea to raise consciousness or and to serve as a deterrent, he said, and the purpose of the law is being defeated. The former Nassau legislator who authored the law, Suffolk quickly followed suit with their own website, although it is neither comprehensive nor promoted, calls the failure very disturbing. Given the fact that heroin is a problem across every demographic line and community, there needs to be more of an emphasis on using the tools that we have to help people, says former Democratic Nassau legislator David Mayas, who is now an attorney in private practice. How it fell through the cracks, I don't know, Presiding Officer Norman Gonzalez of East Meadow said when she first learned from a press reporter that the site had been abandoned, or, as they said, under construction. I think they kind of lost interest, says the former Democratic Suffolk legislator Wayne Horsley, who authored his county's version. It didn't get the play it was supposed to get. I think there's room for expansion if they can get the graphics correct. Nearly 500 people have died of heroin overdoses on Long Island since Natalie's Law was passed. According to statistics provided by medical examiners in both counties, that's nearly double the number of people murdered on the island in the same time during that same period. Of course, the website alone could not have saved those lives, but Nassau disregarded its own long policies, and so long it indicates that drug prevention, a key part of a much-touted three-pronged approach that also includes treatment and enforcement, sometimes the amount to little for more tough talk with little follow-through, and they didn't even abide by their own rules. It's impossible to say how much crime was prevented by other anti-drug initiatives, but a nearly 30% increase in heroin arrests on Long Island over the past 5 years suggests that these efforts, or those efforts at the time, fell short despite the common refrain that police cannot arrest their way out of the crisis. Experts, law enforcement, and former users confirm that the cynical reassertion of heroin as Long Island's drug of choice is partially due to crackdowns on prescription drug black market that made painkillers much pricier, resulting in a 44% increase in fatal heroin ODs on Long Island since 2009. More than 4 million Americans ages 12 or older have used heroin at least once in their lives as of 2011, and totally increased by another 300,000 the following year, according to the latest figures available from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, with nearly a quarter of those getting hooked. And heroin is easier than ever to get since U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration officials say Mexican and Colombian drug cartels have flooded the market with it, with the DEA making 20% of heroin seizures nationwide in New York, including a trio allegedly busted mid-April with $12 million in dope. Dealers that describe the way buyers flock to them as feeding the birdies profit because the stigma for the previous heroin crisis in the 1970s is lost on teenagers. New users continue replacing those lost to overdose or saved by recovery, especially since New wave of heroin is more pure and snortable, although many wind up injecting the drug directly into their bloodstream. You can't experiment with it. It's too powerful, says James Hunt, acting special agent in charge of the DEA's New York Field Division. The heroin that's on the streets now is much stronger than it was 40 years ago, more potent, and consequently more addictive. Jeffrey Reynolds, Executive Director of Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, otherwise known as LICADD, wonders why Long Island appears to be losing its war on opiate use. It's a question that I think more and more of us would like to have an answer to. What's broken, he says. Tell anyone. Can anyone tell me what's broken? Maybe the answer is nothing, and it's just we've been overwhelmed by a problem. But something is not working, and it's not working at all. Long Island heroin is absolutely on the rise. Now, Taylor Sherman, a former heroin user, is now 2 years sober and is training to be a substance abuse counselor. The needle and the damage that it has done is overwhelming. Taylor Sherman was popping Vicodin and snorting heroin a year after he began boozing and smoking pot at 14. Self-medicating his depression as prescribed by the Comac High School popular kids who accepted him. He graduated to shooting heroin intravenously at 17. Upon learning that's how his best friend fatally overdosed, a testament to an addict's self-destructive logic. Escalation to snorting cocaine, smoking crack, and using other drugs soon followed, and so did the arrest and psychiatric ward stays and nearly a dozen aborted trips to drug rehabs, as he seemed destined for jail or the morgue, same as the countless users before him and unfortunately after him. It took me to be on my knees at the age of 20, says Sherman, now 23, 2 years sober and training to become a substance abuse counselor after a spiritual awakening. I needed the heroin and the drugs to give me a solution on how I felt. They took away the emotional, the mental pain that I suffered daily. He's one of the lucky ones who lived to tell his cautionary tale with the hope of helping others avoid the same tragic fate. Since Sherman first started to shoot up, heroin overdose on Long Island rose 44% from 85 in 09 to 122 last year. That's a 74% spike from 47 to 82 ODs for the same time period in Suffolk versus a slight rise from 38 to 40 in Nassau, according to county medical examiners. Nassau police said 21 people died of heroin ODs so far this year, half of last year's rate in the first 3 months of 2014. Non-heroin opiate fatalities in Suffolk dropped 110 to 104 after peaking at 174 in 2011. 88 people overdosed from non-heroin opiates in Nassau last year, the same as 5 years ago, after topping 100 in 2012, although toxicologists and the county caution that adding all non-heroin opiate OD deaths together can be misleading because there is an overlap in some cases in which a victim ingests more than one drug to another. Officials also noted that the 2013 figures preliminary, while the latest cases were not yet completed. The rising heroin overdose deaths and declining painkiller ODs have been credited to authorities cracking down on dubious doctors selling prescriptions after a 2-year Long Island pharmacy robbery shootings that left 6 dead in 2011 in Medford, Long Island. It's partly a side effect on checking their patients' prescription history through a new database on the New York State's Internet System for Tracking Overprescribing Act, commonly known as iStop, which is credited with largely stopping doctor shopping users who go from clinic to clinic with fake symptoms, racking up some painkillers. But once the pill-free for all ended, those who had become dependent upon prescription painkillers, semi-synthetic opiates that offer similar highs as heroin, such as Vicodin, which contains hydrocodone and oxycodone-based Percocet, saw prices as high as 1 per milligram. The choice for many users came down to $80 for 80 milligram Oxycontin pill or $10 for a deck of heroin. Long Island CADD's Reynolds says that he sees kids with 10 to 15 bags per day habits nowadays. After the prescription pill craze, a lot of kids in the suburbs, I should say, and in the cities could no longer get prescription pills, or that it became more expensive for them, so they went on the streets and got their heroin there, and they wound up heroin addicts, thus possibly overdosing, and a lot of them, as you see the statistics. In January, the Nassau Medical Examiner's Office took the unusual step in issuing a public alert to warn users that heroin packets marked 24K in red ink were linked to a string of fatal overdoses. That brand, as much as stamps refer to, was cut with fentanyl, a painkiller toxicologists describe as 100 times more potent than morphine, and metamorphosis, a banned painkiller and fever-reducing drug. Sherman, who notes it's common knowledge among users that the whiter the heroin, the more fentanyl it cuts with, says that despite the good intentions, authorities feel that the good intentions that the drug dealers are cutting this, there isn't any. If anything, they're hurting the people that they're cutting this heroin for. The way the addict looks at it, this stuff must be good if it's killing people. Where can I get some? And that is such a bad thing to even worry about. Best thing for you to do is to go cold turkey. Like Shanna Litz broke down in tears while recalling her arrest and recovery from heroin during legislative panel discussion on the issue. Shanna Litz was strung out and living in a rented Hyundai Sonata with her boyfriend when the couple ran out of money and decided to snatch up a woman's purse in Levittown so they could buy heroin. Police quickly apprehended the duo after the fall of 2010 robbery, but her 31-year-old boyfriend, Gasparino Gardino, hanged himself in Nassau jail, having it hit rock bottom hard. Lynn Slater completed a 9-month inpatient rehab program, same as many before her. 28 days weren't enough. Now, like Sherman, she is in college training to be a drug treatment counselor. This is not something that I would have ever done if I wasn't addicted to heroin, and so sick that I just couldn't, I didn't even know how else to even live on, Lynch told lawmakers through tears at Brentwood public hearing in early April while recalling her arrest. I was sitting in jail with $120,000 bail, my boyfriend was now dead, and I just didn't know what to do. Her case is just one of many of the heroin-related crimes, robberies, burglaries, car break-ins, and that persist within Nassau and Suffolk counties. The leaders frequently cite statistics that indicate crime has come down. Such stats don't refer to the rising number of heroin arrests. Last year was a big year for bank robberies. I attribute that mostly to the heroin, Nassau Police Chief Department Stephen Sonerke said in recent East Meadow community meeting, referring to 29 such cases reported last year while recalling a high of 52 in 1992. Most bank robberies are either drug addicts, alcoholics, or gamblers and need money immediately. It really comes down to this. It's heroin is also being used by the senior citizens because they can't afford painkillers, so they go to heroin. OD stats may show switch from pills to heroin, not just among the young people, but also on the older people. But the arrests for possession of both types of drugs have gone up. Heroin arrests, Nassau rose 28% from 391.09 to 500 last year, while prescription drug arrests rose 132%. And the problem with senior citizens taking the heroin is that they're mixing it with all sorts of other medication that they're already taking, high blood pressure, cholesterol, etc., many other ones. After authorities nabbed top Mexican drug cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman in February, those looking to fill a void left by his arrest are widely expected to continue waging an intercartel Mexican drug war for controlling its smuggling routes that has claimed 40 to 60,000 lives since '06. Folks, bottom line here is that we need to stop selling heroin. We need to get it off the streets. Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spotter, who dubbed the Long Island Expressway Heroin Highway because the dealers use it to go drugs, to transfer drugs from the city to Long Island, so far busted ring dealing Hollywood brand heroin in the Hamptons and a couple supplying dealers with high-octane labeled heroin from the Holtzville home has been successfully prosecuting these cases. A West Side Slip school bus driver and a Merrick postal worker are among the latest arrests for allegedly dope dealing. Spotter and his counterparts in the police and corrections departments echo the sentiment that Long Island can't arrest its way out of the crisis. It is you, the public, that needs to help out. Enforcement and treatment only came into play with the education failed, but it is you, the public, that if you see something, you say something. Protect your own children. Protect your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather. Protect yourselves. Reach for God. I could read this forever about heroin, but we have a major heroin problem on Long Island, and it takes all of us to start working together to help eliminate the problems going on. I could sit here forever and tell you guys how bad it is, but it has gone tremendously on an increase because there is so much overlap between the criminal justice and drug treatment systems. I think there needs to be a concerted effort among policymakers to come up with a different plan, alternative to incarceration, because the jails are so full because of drugs. We need to find a way to help people. As soon as we make arrests, most of them, they end up right in jail. We need to find a place where we can just put them. And we need to start doing that today. I hope to God that you got a great segment out of this. I hope and I pray that if you know somebody that's doing heroin, that you get the help they need. Sometimes you need to intervene hard. Not just ask them to stop, but you need to intervene hard. And if you have any questions, call me at 844-405-HELP. And may God bless each and every one. And please stay away from heroin. Thank you.